from Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Liberals voted down our common-sense Conservative motion to axe the carbon tax on all forms of home heating for all Canadians. Now, the NDP leader said his NDP MPs would be supporting our Conservative motion to keep the heat on. However, not all British Columbia NDP MPs voted to take the carbon tax off. Now, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister quit forcing British Columbians' rates on British Columbia for the carbon tax rates, which he plans to quadruple on home heating?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I have been saying, we have a plan to ensure long-term affordability for particularly vulnerable Canadians. The cost of heating oil is 2 to 4 times that of natural gas, depending on which province you live in. It is accelerated over 75% in 2022. It is a plan that actually addresses that in a way that will give savings to people over the long term. It will do it in a manner that fights climate change. I had the opportunity to speak with Premier Eby about it last week, and I believe that the people in British Columbia will have access to exactly the same proposal as everywhere else.
The Honourable Member from Lethbridge.
The Prime Minister paused the paying of his carbon tax on 3% of Canadian families in the areas where his polls were the lowest. The Liberal Rural Affairs Minister said this. She said that if people in other regions wanted to see a pause as well, then they needed to vote Liberal. But the people in Calgary Skyview did vote for a Liberal Member of Parliament, and yesterday he could have voted to keep the heat on and take the tax off, but instead he voted no to the people of Calgary Skyview. So why is this government so hell-bent on quadrupling their carbon tax that the member from Calgary Skyview left his constituents out in the cold?
Good.
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I have said, we are moving forward on a program that will ensure long-term affordability for people who utilize heating oil, do so in a manner that is consistent with addressing climate change. I have reached out to my counterpart in the government of Alberta, and we will be having conversations about how Alberta can participate in this project moving forward. But I would say once again that it is time, and I think Canadians are expecting the Conservative Party to be able to at least tell folks that they believe in climate change, they have a plan for addressing the climate crisis in a manner that is consistent with long-term economic prosperity and affordability.
Order. Colleagues, I wasn't able to hear who had said that comment, but every member who is recognized by the floor to be able to speak has the right to do so until that time has expired, and the Speaker will let that person know. The Honourable Member from Lethbridge.
So what I heard from the member opposite is that this government is committed to picking winners and losers, and the winners are the 3% that use oil to heat their homes. They won't have to pay a carbon tax for the next 3 years, but the rest of Canada will. When the Minister for Rural Affairs was asked about this, she said, well, they just need to vote more Liberals in place and then we'll give them our attention, referring to those in other parts of the country, of course. Now, for those that live in the constituency of Edmonton Centre, they did elect a Liberal Member of Parliament, and yet they were not showing that favoritism. They were not showing the benefit of having the carbon tax removed. And so my question is simple. Why is this government so hell-bent that the people of Edmonton Centre still have to pay the carbon tax on their home heating?
And again, I'm going to obviously offer the Minister an opportunity to respond, but I'll ask all members that I'm quite aware of the time that members have to pose and to respond to their questions. I politely decline their reminders as to how to do that. The Honourable Minister for Health.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, the members opposite know that more than 8 out of 10 Canadians get more back than they pay. But why are we hell-bent on this? Because our planet demands it. Mr. Speaker, 15,000, that's the number of Canadians who died prematurely as a result of air pollution in the country. That cost $114 billion. It is escalating. If we refuse to take action on this, not only do we have a moral and fiscal imperative, but we have an obligation to ensure the party opposite doesn't return to attacking climate policies across the world and move back to an aggressive state where we cease making the project on climate action, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Selkirk Interlake Eastmain.
Manitoba's new NDP premier has joined the chorus calling on these Liberals to pause the carbon tax. After 8 long years, everyone knows that this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost, and his Liberal MPs in Winnipeg are failing Manitobans. Yesterday, the member for Winnipeg North could have voted to take the tax off and keep the heat on for Manitobans, but instead he voted to leave his constituents out in the cold. And now these Liberals want to quadruple the carbon tax. Why does the member from Winnipeg North always follow orders from his Prime Minister at the expense of his own constituents?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've said a number of times, this is a policy that is about addressing affordability for folks who actually are suffering from the fact that heating oil is a much more expensive way to heat your home. We do this in a manner that actually will enable us to continue the fight against climate change and help folks in the long term with affordability concerns. I would tell you that we have had discussions with the Government of Manitoba. I look forward to being able to move forward on a joint basis with the Government of Manitoba, and I'm pleased to see the Government in Manitoba actually recognize the existence of climate change, something that the Honourable Opposition does not do.
The Honourable Member from Provencher.
After 8 years, we now have the socialists, the separatists, and this Prime Minister who's just not worth the cost. They're all part of this costly carbon tax coalition that is leaving Canadians out in the cold. The Rural Affairs Minister recently told Manitobans that if they wanted the tax break, they had to elect more Liberals. Well, guess what? The folks in St. Boniface, St. Vital did elect a Liberal, and they're still paying the carbon tax. Yesterday, he had a chance to vote to keep the tax off and the heat on for his constituents. Why did that member choose to leave the members of St. Boniface, St. Vital in the cold?
I would like to remind all members in their preparation of questions that the questions should be directed towards the government or the parliamentary secretaries, anything that is, or to committee chairs, for the purposes of related to the business of the government or of the House. That a question to a member is not one that is normally recognized. I think I saw a minister standing up on this issue, but if there is no minister standing up, the minister is standing up. If the minister wishes to answer this question, the minister certainly can. The Minister for Environment and Climate Change.
We're talking, Mr. Speaker, so I was sitting. I'm a Liberal and a proud socialist, Mr. Speaker, but this reminds me of a certain quote from Prime Minister Harper, who talked about the fight against climate change as a socialist plot. That's what the Conservative Party, and here it is, you have it again, Mr. Speaker. They do not believe that climate change is an issue. They do not believe we should do anything about it. They oppose electrification of transportation. They oppose deals like Volkswagen, Stellantis, and Nordvolt. They oppose wind development off the shores of Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. They have no plan to fight climate change. They have no plan for the economy. They have no plan for the future of Canada. Bravo!
The Honourable Member from Flamborough-Glenbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the NDP said his caucus would be voting against the divisive decision by the Prime Minister to pause the payment of the carbon tax for just 3% of Canadians while doing nothing for the rest. However, in yesterday's vote, the member from Hamilton Centre didn't even bother to vote. If the NDP member from Hamilton Centre won't do his job, Conservatives will. Will the Prime Minister quit forcing Ontarians to pay a quadrupled carbon tax on their home heating?
The Honourable So I would like to just point out that question, although the preamble dealt with a member who is not of the government, the final part of the question, and that sort of hybrid question, was directed towards the Prime Minister. So the honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if that member opposite is so concerned about helping Ontarians, then he should be asking the Premier of Ontario to join the program to provide free heat pumps to the hundreds of thousands of Ontarians who would qualify. As he knows, and as every member in this House full well knows, this is a program that applies across the country to transition folks away from home heating oil so that they don't have dirty, more expensive ways to heat their home. We can do this for cheaper, and we can help Canadians both with affordability and the existential threat of fighting climate change, something that Conservatives continue to deny. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, very good.